I Hate Politics is a podcast dedicated to exploring a human activity we love to hate. We look at human life, culture, economics closest to us in our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and in our local governments. Together, we'll explore how politics is central to getting things done in societies where we treasure diverse views and preferences. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. I've spent my life studying politics, and I know this. Unless we want to live in a dictatorship or a monarchy, we are stuck with politics. Politics is more than just Trump, Biden, or elections. It's how we fix potholes, make our streets safer, where we put our schools, and decide who goes to them. It's about coming together as a community. It's about us. Let's go find those stories. In this episode, in time for Montgomery County's only book fair, the Gaithersburg Book Festival, I talked to City of Gaithersburg Mayor Judd Ashman about the origins and rationale of building a publicly supported event he founded 11 years ago. And I explore the highly emotive politics of public art as Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission, often called Parks and Planning, chooses a mural design for its new headquarters in Wheaton. The mural design selected by Parks and Planning is the work of local artist Nicole Borgia. You can see the design on the planning website, but to draw the picture in words, it shows a young boy with arms raised, surrounded by several entertainers in various stages of dance, music, and performance. The boy is white and dressed in street clothes, while the entertainers are persons of color dressed mostly in traditional wear. The announcement of the design led to some consternation about the message of the design. It led me to poke around to understand the process by which we select public art. And it turned out that in emotive matters, such as the selection of public art, process is critical to establishing legitimacy. While few artists and writers will deny the political nature of their work, art and culture are often seen as creative realms separated from politics. But both Judd Ashman and Parks and Planning Commission, who have faced criticism, are also determined that this is a good spend of public money. The Gaithersburg Book Festival will be virtual this year for a second year in a row, but instead of lasting one weekend, it'll run an entire month. More information on their website, gaithersburgbookfestival.org. Also in this episode, we use music from Montgomery County native and DC singer-songwriter Emily Hall. Emily is also an international educator who trains teachers in integrating music in the classroom. You can find her work on Spotify. If you want to showcase your music on the podcast or know someone else who does, please email ihppod@gmail.com. And now the news roundup. Hannah O'Looney of Richard Montgomery High School won the election to be the student member of the Montgomery County Board of Education for 2021-22, defeating Henry Kay, also of Richard Montgomery High School. Richard Montgomery, or RM as it's locally known, has now provided 3 of the last 4 student members of the board. Out there in College Park, conservation versus new graduate student housing. Maryland Matters is reporting a pitched battle to save a 10-acre wooded parcel adjacent to the state's flagship institution of higher learning, the University of Maryland. The contours of the fight are similar to other battles elsewhere. What struck me as interesting is this. Privately owned land, when developed, have stricter tree conservation and stormwater management rules than state-owned land. Why? I'm going to look into that in a future episode. The differential treatment of development in private and public hands also comes up in the public art story this week. 2 brownie points for the Maryland State Department of Transportation. First, for rejecting Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich's proposal to single-track the Purple Line Tunnel in Bethesda to save money. Not only was this short-sighted, but now state and county coffers have seen a windfall in tax revenues and federal aid dollars, making the cut unnecessary. Second, University Boulevard in Wheaton is getting a new bike lane starting June 2021 as part of a pilot project announced by the Maryland State Highway Administration. The plan is to temporarily designate a travel lane on the westbound side of the street for non-automobile use through the fall of 2021. The State Highway Administration is going to collect data to see what the demand for non-auto use is on University Boulevard and are holding a virtual public meeting on May 13th between 6 and 8 p.m. That should be very interesting. You can find the meeting link on OpenStreet's website, openstreetsmontgomery.com. Montgomery College President Darion Pollard is leaving to be president of Nevada State College. Her departure means that 2 of the big 3 education jobs in the county will have to be filled this year. MCPS Superintendent Jack Smith is retiring in June 2021. The 3rd big education job in the county, the executive director of the universities at Shady Grove, is also newly filled. Ann Kademian recently started in that position during the pandemic. Together with the terming out of Craig Rice, the influential chair of the Education and Culture Committee on the County Council, the education leadership in the county is getting a full makeover. County Council Rice also made news by offering a bill that will require anyone soliciting money from cars on streets to have a permit. He has justified the bill as improving traffic safety. But of all the pedestrians who have died on streets in the county in the last 3 years, perhaps 1 may have been panhandling, and even that is unclear. This is really an anti-panhandling bill intended to make the lives of the poor even harder. Many advocates for homeless people are concerned about the enforcement of the new law, in particular the use of police. They are concerned about criminalizing poverty and homelessness. Rice says he's going to remove all references to the police from the bill. Question is, if the police doesn't enforce the law, who will? And if a homeless person without a permit is hit or, God forbid, killed, will they now be judged at fault for not having a permit? The county, state, and the country repeatedly judge pedestrians at fault for their own deaths, without recognizing that road design contributed to make the pedestrians unsafe in the first place. You can sign up to speak to the County Council on the bill. The hearing is slated for May 11th. Washington Post recently wrote an editorial in support of Governor Larry Hogan's 495-270 toll lane expansion plan and complained about how Marylanders were fighting over the issue while Virginia was blazing a brand new path. So, just to be clear, Washington Post also supports urgent national, global, and local climate action. Different editorial writers write different editorials is my best guess with what's happening there. For all you census geeks out there, the Maryland state census numbers are out. Census.gov is a beautiful place to visit, though rabbit hole warning. I'll be back with Gaithersburg Mayor Judd Ashman. Judd Ashman, welcome to Ahead Politics.
Thanks. It's an honor to be here.
You are the founder of the Gaithersburg Book Festival. When is the event?
Gaithersburg Book Festival starts on Saturday, this Saturday, May 1st, and it runs through May 28th. Generally, when we're doing our in-person festival, it's a one-day event. But since we're trying to cram a lot more than 100 authors and about 40 author programs in total into this virtual festival, we can't do that all in one day. So we're sort of stretching it out.
Sure. Do you do them in the evening, in the morning, and when do you do them?
We're generally doing one program at noon, so you can spend your lunch break with us, and we're doing one in the evening at 7 p.m. And everything will be happening on our YouTube channel. So if for whatever reason those times aren't convenient for you, the videos will still be there. But the advantage to coming when we're premiering these videos is that a lot of the authors will actually be there in that first hour on the chat, so you can interact with the authors. We're really active on social media too, particularly on Facebook, Gberg Book Fest, on Twitter. And you can find all the information about everything at our website, GaithersburgBookFestival.org.
How did you think about the Gaithersburg Book Festival? How did it come about? What is the evolution?
Oh, man, there's so many things that sort of played into this idea. Number one, I grew up in Miami, Florida, which has it's the home of the largest book event in America, the Miami Book Fair International. A tremendous event that's been going on for more than 30 years. And I was, when I came up to DC in 95, and then with Gaithersburg in 97, shortly after that, the Library of Congress and Laura Bush, who was the first lady at the time, in 2001, I believe, they started this event called the National Book Festival. It was on the Mall, and I loved it. I love the creative process. I love hearing the backstories of how people come up with their characters, or if it's journalists, like the backstories of some of these famous people in history. And I just enjoyed it. Was my favorite event for years and years, and I love reading. And in 2008, when the Bush administration, Laura Bush being the founder, was leaving, and they didn't know who was coming in, it's a fall festival, they came to the Library of Congress, James Billington, may he rest in peace, came to the stage and asked the whole crowd, like, please write to the new incoming White House and see if they'll continue this event, because we just don't know what the future is. And I came away that day thinking to myself, you know what? I've been in the city council for a year at that time, and there are so many terrific authors, journalists living in the DC metro area within an hour's drive of Gaithersburg. If the National Book Festival was canceled, that would be a tragedy. But why can't we do one of our own? And that's sort of where the juices started flowing. And then I thought, and you know what? Gaithersburg doesn't really have a cultural identity yet. And this is an opportunity for us to sort of plant our flag on the cultural landscape and establish ourselves as a place where interesting things are happening, and interesting people come to think interesting thoughts and have interesting discussions. So I brought the idea to my colleagues, the mayor and the council at the time, and they were supportive, and then brought it to staff, and the idea sort of germinated from there. So from fall 2008, when I had the idea, we launched our first festival in 2010. So it took about 14 months worth of planning, and we got our first one done.
How big was the first one?
The first one, we had something like 50 or 60 authors speaking. And then in terms of attendance, we had a huge attendance. I mean, it was like 6,000 people. I was thrilled with the attendance at the time. Although I've always dreamt big. I always look at the benchmark as 20,000. And it wasn't until much later that we started to get crowds of 20,000. And the weather always had to cooperate too.
Do you have a sense whether it's Gaithersburg people, from Montgomery County people, Washington people driving over, Frederick people, or it doesn't matter to you?
We do. We try to get some sense of that each year, and there's a lot of reasons why we would want to. We want to see how successful this is in drawing people from all over the region. In fact, we do. We get tons of people from DC, from all over Montgomery County, from beyond. I mean, we've certainly had people come from North Carolina, from West Virginia, from Pennsylvania.
Wow.
We've had tons of tourists come specifically for this event, because it's not often that you get a collection of some of these great storytellers and authors that they get to really meet and have some FaceTime with.
So what is involved in organizing this? I mean, do you have a team? Who's responsible? I mean, I know at some point you, but surely you're not spending all your year doing this.
Well, you might be surprised, but it is definitely not all me. So this works like a real sort of organic public-private partnership, in the sense that there is a planning committee of like 24 volunteers, and we're always looking for more. So whoever's listening here, if you're really into books and want to get exposed to some authors, send me a note. There's a couple dozen people. The volunteers work on the programming. So it's mostly volunteers that are recruiting the authors, figuring out who's got books coming out, who's going to be have an audience, who's going to be a draw for the festival. They put together our workshops for aspiring writers. They help us market the festival. They help us attract sponsors for the festival. Then we have our professional staff, our City of Gaithersburg staff, who work mostly on the logistics. They're the ones writing the contracts to get our tents and our sound systems and our signage and do all that sort of stuff. And coordinate, hotels for the authors who are coming in from out of town. It really is just sort of this seamless mix of public and private work on this event. And without either one, if either of those two were to leave, this event would just not be able to function. It wouldn't be sustainable.
What's the economics of this?
We estimate the festival cost at somewhere like $110,000, $120,000, which is sort of on par with a lot of our big events like Oktoberfest, like Summerfest. What's different is we get a lot of sponsorships because I think sponsors recognize it gives them a chance to get in front of some of like the best read, best educated decision maker types and a diverse crowd. We generally get, I want to say, $40,000 or $50,000 in cash sponsorships, a lot more in-kind sponsorships. Everything's different during lockdown. Sure. But this year, the last 2 years, our biggest sponsor has been the David and Michael Blair Family Foundation. They've been extraordinarily generous, but we have partnerships with MCPS and with Montgomery College and with Johns Hopkins and, all the sort of big community organizations that you might think of are generally, they have their hands in this festival.
I was surprised you didn't mention any publishers and things.
Publishers don't tend to sponsor us. We do, we have book industry partners. Obviously Politics and Prose bookstore is our bookseller, and we have the Washington Independent Review of Books, and we have the Writer's Center. At times they've been part of our festival. What publishers contribute is our authors. They send us their authors who they're touring for new books. They recommend us to authors who they think need some exposure. So they're partners, but they don't send us money.
Okay, before I forget, who are the biggest names for this year?
Biggest names for this year. Thank you for asking that. I think probably the biggest name is Lisa Scottolini, who's a huge #1 bestseller in crime novels for a lot of years. This year, she's got a historical fiction that takes place in pre-World War II Italy. Other big names, Dr. Michio Kaku, for people who are really into science, the Science Channel, the Universe shows. He's a theoretical physicist. He's all over those shows on TV, and he's got a book called The God Equation. It traces science's pursuit of the next unifying formula, like E=mc², but the next one that will sort of unify everything. Janine Cummins, who's huge, her book American Dirt last year, which had a bit of controversy, was one of the top 10 best-selling novels of the whole year. She's going to be with us. Other bestsellers, Elizabeth McCracken, political type, Susan Page, who moderated the vice presidential debate from USA Today, and Karen Tumulty. Susan's got a book on Speaker Pelosi. Karen Tumulty's got a book on Nancy Reagan, and so that should be a really interesting conversation. A couple big sci-fi authors. Cory Doctorow is going to be with us. On the kids side, Jerry Craft, who won the Newbery Award last year, the Newbery Medal for a graphic novel. He was the first graphic novelist ever to win that award last year. Has his follow-up this year. John Klassen, who's won Caldecott Medal a couple of times, and just a beloved illustrator. Gordon Corman, Tom Engelberger, lots. And I'm not even hitting the tip of the iceberg here. There's over 100 authors, and just every taste, every age, we're set.
Gaithersburg is a very diverse city.
Yes.
Does the book festival, and in particular the authors you bring, represent that kind of diversity?
The answer to that is yes. This year's author list is incredibly diverse.
Mm.
And I encourage everybody to go to GaithersburgBookFestival.org and go through the list and see. It's diverse in terms of race and ethnicity. It's diverse in terms of subject matter.
Mhm.
It's diverse in every single way. If you were sort of having the check boxes, we have Native American authors, we have a lot of African American authors, we have Latino authors, we have Asian authors. We're all over the place this year.
Is there a Spanish section in the book fair?
We have experimented with that in a couple of ways. One, when we do an in-person festival, we have a tent that's dedicated to, we call it the Storytime tent, where we have guest readers.
Sure.
Kids come in and listen to stories all day. And at the Storytime tent, we've done it in a number of languages, including Spanish. And we also did a Spanish language workshop for aspiring writers in 2019, and look to continue to do it. In the virtual version of Gaithersburg Book Festival, it is a scaled down version.
Mhm.
We do not have anything in a language other than English for our virtual festival. But when we come back in person, knock on wood, in 2022, I'm sure that we will return and continue to grow that aspect of our festival.
Book festivals tend to be dominated, on both the audience side and the presenter side by sort of white middle class demography, right? Do you think that you've actually broken through that at Gaithersburg?
I wouldn't make any sort of grand claims about that. We definitely, in terms of on the presenter side, we have always had diverse lineups in terms of presenters, sometimes more than others. And we don't always have control over that. Essentially, our process is we send out a whole, hundreds of invites to authors who have books coming out. And we are very intentional about inviting a diverse group of authors, but they don't always say yes. It's a function of who says yes, for the most part. In terms of the audience, we don't necessarily track. I'm trying to think of our survey. I don't think our survey tracks race per se. It does track age, and our audiences do tend to skew a little bit older. I'm not sure books are as popular as they, as at other times in American history have been, in terms of people in sort of the younger and middle age.
What are you doing deliberately to ensure representativeness? Maybe if the committee that puts it all together is that representative?
What we're doing is, as I said before, when we're putting together our programs, we're being very intentional about creating a diverse program. We, in addition to the big authors that are on a national scale and publishers are putting on tour, we also do our best to feature locally based authors who are sort of up and coming and not as well known. And in a lot of cases, they're bringing stories to the table that are also locally based, and from a very diverse set of perspectives and points of view. So I think we sort of go above and beyond in the programming sense.
Okay.
And then as far as our committee goes, again, it's a volunteer committee, and I will put out this invitation again on this show. Send me a note if it sounds like the type of endeavor you'd be interested in. Send me a note, because we're always looking for new energy and expertise to bring to our committee to help put this thing together. But the committee is largely a function of who volunteers, who's willing to volunteer. I'm recruiting all the time, and And so I don't think it's not necessarily a scientific situation.
We just did an episode on neighborhood associations. I don't know if you missed that, but that's exactly the point we were talking about, is that how do you make volunteer organizations more representative? Because volunteerism requires a certain kind of, resource base to be able to do it. You have to have time, you have to have energy, you have to have interest, and then be able to feel confident that you can step into a room and be a contributor. That is not often the case.
Yeah. I that's a really interesting subject matter too, and it goes beyond the book festival committee, because the city of Gaithersburg has a couple dozen volunteer committees that provide really useful information to the mayor and council that we factor in and weigh pretty heavily in decisions that we make. And we periodically look at it. We're sort of looking at everything again at the moment. And yeah, it's not even just in terms of the diversity of the person who's volunteering, but also the geographic diversity of certain neighborhoods tend to generate more volunteers than other neighborhoods.
That's right.
So yes, it's a really interesting conversation and an interesting challenge, because we do want to have all of the viewpoints represented.
Well, we have an episode on that, so check it out.
Awesome.
Generally, more broadly, now, not specifically to one group or the other, what do you think the Gaithersburg Book Festival brings to the city, the county, us in Rockville? I mean,
we love Rockville, by the way.
I'm sure you do.
We do. We absolutely do. We have some friendly banter with the Rockville Mayor and Council.
Right.
What do I think it brings? Well, in the direct sense, we do get a lot of people that come to our festival from all over the region. And some of them stay at our hotels, and some of them eat at our restaurants and shop at our, retail establishments both in Gaithersburg and Rockville and Germantown, all over the area. We do survey on that. So we have some sense of at least some economic impact of the festival, though it's extremely hard to track.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In terms of more general, less quantifiable, reading a book is, in essence, it is an empathic or empathetic exercise. It's an exercise in empathy, because there is no better way to understand another person's thoughts, their perspective, than to read a book and hear what he or she is thinking. In that exercise, we develop our empathy skills, and I think I'd argue it makes us better citizens. It makes us better residents. It makes us a better community.
Are you thinking about going hybrid next, in the future? Because you have fans in North Carolina, apparently.
Yeah. Well, we still want them to come, and we're still going to give them a reason to come. But yeah, the fact that we have learned this, how to do this virtual format, is advantageous, and I think we'll use it periodically. I was, one of the most popular, beloved authors in America is a lady named Ann Patchett.
Yep.
And I was on a Zoom. I was on this book festival director Zoom with Ann Patchett the other day, and Ann was saying that this has actually been, it's terrible. The pandemic's terrible. And all its impacts have been terrible, but for her, in terms of touring and her ability to participate in events and festivals that she would otherwise never have had the chance to, she thinks that's been a good thing. And so I think, if we have an opportunity to have an event with Stephen King, but he doesn't want to come out here, he just wants to do it virtually, we know how to do it now. So I do think that we will have some virtual programming. That will remain a part of our festival. I still think the best part of our festival will be the in-person, because it is a truly communal experience. And, reading and the act of writing, the act of reading are solitary events. The opportunity to share that with a lot of people is kind of an amazing thing. And I for anybody who hasn't been, I think you'd really like it.
And I am free, I am home, and all is well. I am free, I am home, and all is well. I am free, I am home, and all is well. And I am free, I am home, and all is well. I am free, I am home, and all is well. I am free, I am home, and all is well.
That's Montgomery and DC singer-songwriter Emily Hall. Wheaton is an area on the eastern side of Montgomery County, northwest of Silver Spring, marked roughly by the Capitol Beltway to the south, the Glenmont Metro Station to the north, and a vibrant business district that is marked by three arterials: Wears Mill Road, University Boulevard, and Georgia Avenue. In this business district, right next to the Wheaton Metro stop, is the spanking new headquarters for the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission. Parks and Planning, if you don't know, is a unique institution established in the early 20th century to plan and manage development in two and only two of Maryland counties abutting the national capital in Washington, Montgomery and Prince George's. The new headquarters has a large blank wall, and the commission decided that it would brighten the neighborhood with a large 88-foot mural. They invited designs from artists and chose three and organized an online voting system to choose the winner. The mural design that won, by local artist Nicole Borgia, received 65% of the online vote. But once Parks and Planning announced and revealed the winner, some local residents had reservations.
Hi, my name is Kadar Muhammad and I'm from Montgomery County. Wheaton, Maryland is a place near and dear to my heart. It's been my home and will continue to be my home. When finding a way to express my town's cultural diversity, two buzzwords come to mind: inclusion and equity. The beautiful thing about art is each person may perceive something different about it, but unfortunately, it only takes one person to find something offensive. Art might not have intentional offense, but it still may harm someone based on initial perception. One thing that can help is context, but it can't be assumed that each person will seek additional research on what the art means. So, what does the naked eye see in the mural that's controversial? Black and brown people entertaining a white boy that's at the center of the photo. People might not have context on what the artist's message was based on the illustration, so they might find offense to it. It's not equitable and it's not inclusive. Diversity shouldn't be controversy.
Hi, my name is David Choi. As a Wheaton resident, I'm offended by this depiction of black and brown people entertaining a white boy to express my town's cultural diversity. I also question how this mural celebrates our parks. I do love the high contrast posterized strokes and the dance movements individually, yet the collage itself feels disrespectfully thrown together. Lonely dancers, cut from their partners like magazine clippings, haphazardly propped up around their savior. Their names and credits stripped. Why are they in traditional costume, used and dehumanized? Why is this white boy at the center of attention in plain street clothes? How does it represent my community today?
After hearing these complaints, I followed up with the artist Nicole Borgia, who reiterated that the mural was inspired by her son, who has a developmental disability. My son dancing in front of me, despite his frequent inability to be understood as fully equal to his typically developing peers, shares their humanity. My son is dancing with the dancers. He is no more being entertained by them than they are by him. She also pointed out that women are seldom creators of public art and as the only woman finalist, she has much to contribute to the conversation. After hearing from the artist, I reached out to Montgomery Planning Board Planning Director Gwen Wright to get the official position.
We have had a public art program for many years, and it's tied in to what's called our optional method of development. In order to get density above a base level of density in these kinds of zones, you have to provide certain public amenities. One of the public amenities that can be offered up is public art. So this public art is being provided by private developers, private owners of land, and they are doing it in exchange for additional density that is built on their property. When that happens, I think that we felt it, and this was literally set up 30 years ago, that we needed a art review panel made up of people who with expertise in public art and expertise in development, and some folks who are just residents, to make sure that the balance was appropriate, that we were getting public art that was of a very high quality, that could be maintained over time. It wouldn't get installed and then fall apart, that it was a good contribution to, it was a good amenity to the public realm. And that to assure that sort of having a objective group of people looking at that to make sure that the density that was being provided in exchange for this amenity was appropriate. Another part, which you may want to follow up and do another piece on, is all of the work done by our Arts and Humanities Council. They work very hard to get public art in other locations, including county-owned public buildings and squares. The third part that we at Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission own a whole variety of parks and other buildings and offices. And there are times that we install public art in our parks, in buildings, and in offices. And there was recently a wonderful mural installed in one of our local parks. And we're now in the process of trying to begin to fit out our new Wheaton headquarters building with public art, some of which has already been installed in our lobby, several public art pieces, and another which is in progress, which is a mural that is going to be on the north wall of the building facing a surface parking lot.
Your particular process seems to be very different from both the Arts and Humanities Council process to me, and the art review panel process that you just described, right? And your process is almost entirely internal. I want to know what the logic of that difference is.
Well, I think that it is something that has evolved over time. I think that we have been, to be honest, opportunistic, that when we have had an ability to come up with some public art on a piece of MNC PPC owned land, we as the property owners have just proceeded with that. I mean,
but it is public land. Why is there not a public review?
Well, I think that that's a great question, and I don't know that there is an answer other than we are, as the stewards of all of this parkland and buildings that are owned by MNC PPC. We are always busy in making architectural changes, adding, public art, doing other activities to enhance our environment. With the mural on the Wheaton headquarters building, I think we have tried to perhaps be a little more transparent and inclusive in getting input as to what the appropriate mural would be. And so I'll just share that process briefly. We decided we thought it was important not to have a blank wall on the north wall of the building. And so we proceeded in concert with the, the Wheaton headquarters building was a public-private partnership.
Sure.
And between the county, MNC, PPC, and a private development group called Stonebridge Paris. So we proceeded to plan for having a mural of some sort on the north wall of the building. We decided to try to create a process that would be very, very, again, transparent, public, unlike perhaps other decisions in the past where, we would simply sort of say, oh, we want this piece of public art, we're going to contract with an artist, and we're just going to install it. So we actually put out a request for expressions of interest, and we got proposals from 27 different artists. So we said, let's put together a committee, and then let's actually crowdsource it. Let's let the citizens and residents of this area pick the mural that they think would be best. So we honed down the 27 submissions to 3 finalists, and those were based on a number of criteria, including who we felt could actually do the mural, complete it, bring it to fruition. It's a big project. It's not like just painting a picture on a piece of plywood. It's going to require lots of materials and probably a cherry picker to get up and do painting at the high levels. It's a big project. So we went ahead and had 3 finalists, and then we crowdsourced it by putting it out there for a vote. And we were actually amazed at the reaction that we got. Over 11,700 votes on this, which showed us that Wheaton really wanted to participate in this decision making.
But how do you know the votes were from Wheaton? Could they've been from
California? They didn't have to be from Wheaton. They could be from anywhere in the county.
Or it could be anywhere in the country, right?
Well, I suppose that's true, although I think that we did not publicize it throughout the United States. We only publicized it in Montgomery County.
The artist could have.
I suppose that's true. So you could not have someone who could vote on their computer 5, 6, 7 times.
So you have those IP addresses?
I do not know the answer.
Potentially you have those IP addresses.
Our IT staff could probably find them, yes.
Okay. And we could probably geotag those IP addresses.
That is possible, but we are not intending to do that.
Question is, you claimed that, that Wheaton was really interested in this, right? So how did we know that it is Wheaton that actually voted? And Wheaton is, as you know, is one of the less wealthier parts of the county and has a digital divide. I am wondering how you thought about overcoming that digital divide in the particular context of Wheaton.
Well, I don't know that we really thought it through in that way. We have never done a crowdsourcing voting system like this before for a piece of public art. So it is our first effort. And, I think that as we learn from it, we will, perhaps improve upon it if we do this again in the future. I do think that the idea of crowdsourcing a piece of public art is a very inclusive process, because although you talk about a digital divide, I will say that many, many people today, whether they are wealthy or not wealthy, have an iPhone. And anyone with an iPhone can vote in a crowdsourcing project like this. So it actually brings a lot of it brings a lot of opportunity for people who might not be able to walk into a building and put a ballot in a box. It brings a lot of opportunities for folks to actually participate.
But what is it truly interesting, Gwen, is that the model in front of you was not a crowdsourcing model. The art review panel is not a crowdsourcing model. It's an expert determination model, right? So that is the 30-year existing model that is in front of you, right? And you chose this other crowdsourcing model. What was the thinking?
We thought it was just much more transparent and much more exciting to actually hear from 11,700 members of the community instead of just 8 or 9 experts.
However, you don't know, at least you haven't done the analysis to say whether those 11,700 people were from Wheaton or from Montgomery County or from the state of Maryland or from California or maybe, from Russia. We don't know that, right? And until you have that analysis, I'm not sure you can make that claim.
I think it's very interesting that you say Russia. Do you feel like the Russians have also infiltrated this effort? And
it's just,
vote on this?
Or UK. I mean, UK. I don't know. It's UK or, take Spain. I don't know. It's just a country.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think, again, that there are always pitfalls with every kind of process. And I think that this process, again, for the first time we did it, I view as a success because it got a very, very strong number of people participating. And I, again, believe that I do not believe that the Russians have infiltrated our voting on this mural.
But you haven't done the analysis, you said.
No, we have not gone back and geocoded every vote.
To be able to make, so you can't really make that claim.
True, that's true. And maybe next time we do something like this, we'll ask for some sort of, zip code identifier for people who vote. But the reality is that even if someone was asked for their zip code, they could put in a false zip code. It's very, very hard to, to do checking up on everyone who votes in a process. This was meant to be a process that was actually not meant to be a conspiracy. It was meant to be fun. It was meant to get people involved. It was meant to give people a voice. It was meant to take public art beyond simply a group of experts deciding on what the public art should be or not be, and to give the community a voice. And so we think that's a good thing.
Well, I mean, if you did, that would be a good thing. I'm a political scientist. There are certain cases where we have expert panels. Judges, for example, are expert panels, right? So there are cases where we use expert panels. There are cases where we vote, right? Voting is good for something and not good for others. It seemed to me that the art review panel was an established process, but then there are certain kinds of public art projects that that Parks and Planning does, that is outside of the art review
But do you
panel.
think that having the community vote on what they would like to see as their public art is a bad thing? Send it to just a group of experts who can decide on high what's going to end up in the Wheaton community?
But that's what you have when a private developer applies for it.
Well, it is.
The question is
tied in with a legalistic regulatory process.
The sense I'm getting is there's a different standard for when private developers are asking for dispensation for their public art, and a different standard for when you are doing this internally. And I'm asking whether
that's true.
And I'm asking whether the distinction is justified. And should it remain?
Well, it's an interesting question. And if we do this again, we'll have to wrestle with that. Okay. I think that, I have a great, and again, I don't want to sound at all disparaging to our art review panel. They're a wonderful, wonderful group of experts. And they do a great job, and they do it as volunteers, and they provide a public service without any compensation. So I don't want to disparage them in any way, shape, or form. I'm just sort of saying in this case, we decided to do a different process that we thought would again be a little more transparent, would be fun, would get the community very involved in an exciting project. I think that, and again, I think that it worked in that sense. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback about being able to vote. People like that.
What lessons can we draw from my conversations about the politics of public art and culture? I'll start with something very primal. Art is powerful. Art and culture are politically powerful. For what small amounts we expend on public art, the impact and emotion it generates is outsized and disproportionate. For Parks and Planning, the Wheaton headquarters mural is probably an infinitesimal portion of the cost of the entire building. But the emotive impact is something else. The choice to continue to commission public art is a recognition of the importance, the political importance of public art. Parks and Planning is looking into how best to address the concerns about the mural's design. Mayor Judd Ashman has persisted with the Gaithersburg Book Festival in the face of some criticism that this is a vanity project. It may be, but it is also immaterial. The winner is a culture and identity that Gaithersburg and Montgomery County can build around books, writing, and reading. Now, only if we could do it in Spanish as well. The Wheaton mural falls in a category where it did not need, by law or custom, or both, I'm not sure which, to be reviewed by the Art Review Panel or by the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County. Instead, MNCPPC, the Parks and Planning Commission, says that it organized an online voting system to make the selection process more transparent, inclusive, and fun. There is a difference between art paid for by private developers, or when it is on county property, and when it is on Parks and Planning properties. And it is unclear why this distinction exists, and unclear still whether this distinction should be allowed to exist. There are many cautionary tales about online voting. My personal experience with online engagement in my teaching is that just having a computer or an iPhone is not sufficient demolition of the digital divide. MNCPPC did not geotag the more than 11,000 votes it received. So we don't really know whether it was Wheaton that voted or who in Wheaton that voted. Given the demography of Wheaton, I'm fairly confident that a significant number of people in the community did not know, did not have access, or did not feel empowered enough to participate in the voting. While the gentrifying middle class families moving into Wheaton are very technologically capable, the still majority Latino population of the area tends to be poorer, less educated, and less engaged in online government. If you want to find and visit public art in Montgomery County, go find it at mcatlas.org/art. And don't forget, Gaithersburg Book Festival starts May 1st. That's all for this episode. New music for this episode came from Montgomery County native and now DC singer-songwriter Emily Hall. Emily is also an international educator who trains teachers in integrating music in the classroom. You can find her work on Spotify. I'm very much looking forward to showcasing local talent and especially local music students in the podcast. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone who wants to please email us at ihppod@gmail.com or reach out on Twitter at IHPpod. I hope you will subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and your home. See you next time.
The end of all our greed, and live the lives we want to lead. Supply and demand's not so sustainable. Our planet's resources aren't able to keep living like this. So stand up and make a difference, 'cause freedom lives in your heart and in your mind. No country's borders can build the divide. No constitution's words can define our freedom. Comes from inside. Our freedom comes from inside.